Dear viewers, welcome to episode 6 of Lost Sydney. I'm your friendly host, Ben Summers from Ben's History Videos, and let's begin. In today's episode, our subject is the history of St Mary's Cathedral. Situated on College Street opposite Hyde Park, St Mary's Cathedral is an impressive structure. With grand and imposing stonework and a beautifully decorated interior, it really stands out among its modern neighbours. This video discusses the present-day cathedral, in addition to its long-gone predecessors. And now we must ask the question, what's the story of these forgotten buildings, and how many were there? This video will answer both those questions. The seeds of St Mary's were first sown on May 3rd, 1820, with the arrival of Fathers John Joseph Terry and Philip Connolly. Both were Roman Catholics. For a time after they set foot in the colony, Fathers Terry and Connolly held Mass in a hotel called the Harp Without the Crown, situated on Sydney's Pitt Street. It was in this building on June 15, 1820, that the discussion around needing a Catholic chapel first arose. The outcome of this was a follow-up meeting on June 30th that year in the courthouse at 12 o'clock. The courthouse was situated in a wing of the old Sydney Hospital on Macquarie Street and is today the location of the New South Wales Parliament. During this second meeting, a committee was chosen for the management, conducting and selecting a site for the building. A public subscription was also established. Catholics like Mr. William Davis could afford to donate financially to the cause, though many donations were made in kind. Convicts comprised half the colony's Catholic population, and almost all the remainder were men who had received tickets of leave. Poverty was also rampant. To keep funding coming in, the committee looked outside its ranks to the colony's Protestant population, and several non-Catholics created a subcommittee to gather donations. Even the treasurer of the fund, John Thomas Campbell, was a Protestant. The next question was, where would this chapel be built? At the time, the rocks and its surrounds were the finest part of Sydney, so logically the chapel would be built there, right? No. Instead, the present site was chosen, and this seems to have come down to the influence of James Meehan, Deputy Surveyor General. Father John Terry appears to have been unhappy about the location, writing about the very low and uneven surface. This lot of land had a lot more space, though it overlooked the area which the clay used to make the bricks for Governor Macquarie's buildings was sourced from. In stark contrast to its barren state back then, this same area is now the beautifully decorated Hyde Park, which may be the subject of a future video. The 29th of October 1821 marked the day the foundation stone of the church was laid. Father Terry had wanted the stone to be laid on the Feast of All Saints, though Governor Macquarie wasn't available then as he was touring country New South Wales. This meant the laying of the stone had to be delayed so the governor could attend. Who designed the church remains a mystery. One source used to make this video states that the architect was James Dempsey. Certainly, Dempsey was a key member of the fundraising committee, a prominent Catholic and a trained architect, so it's possible that he worked on the building of the first St Mary's. On the other hand, my second source makes no mention of him, but does mention that Father Terry came up with the basic design. This is supported by a simple sketch he made of his preferred design. A small church, only 1 story high, it included pointed windows and pinnacles. The use of this style for these was a nod to Gothic-style architecture which at the time was rising in popularity. By 1833, work had reached the stage where Father Terry could hold the first Mass there, which occurred on December the 5th that year, though the church remained incomplete. The remaining work to finish the building was carried out under the Most Reverend Archbishop John Bede Paulding, OSB, after his arrival in the colony on the 13th of September 1835. Among Paulding's tasks was repaying the debts his predecessor had taken on to construct the building. Even though he had been sent to Tasmania by this point, Terry kept up a keen interest in St Mary's, exchanging letters with Archbishop Paulding about the cathedral. He donated £500 to the building fund during 1840. This was followed by a further £2,000 during 1858 to pay for the extensions, while Terry was serving as the parish priest of Balmain. The following images show the church during the early and later years of its existence. In the first images, the church is in original condition, while in the second ones it has been expanded. This latter work was also carried out during Paulding's tenure, and he picked Englishman Augustus Welby Northmore Pugin for this task. The two had met in Britain at the opening of St Chad's Cathedral in Birmingham and St Giles Catholic Church in Cheadle, which is located in Staffordshire. Pugin had emerged as the leading architect in the movement to revive Gothic architecture, becoming well known in his native land as well as Ireland. This style eventually earned the title of Gothic Revival. Though he never came to Australia, Pugin was convinced by Paulding to draw up the designs for a number of churches. Among the modifications made under Pugin's supervision during 1851 was the addition of a cathedral to St Mary's. This shouldn't be confused with the present building. Pugin is closely associated with several other churches in Australia. These are St Stephen's Chapel in Brisbane, while in Sydney his surviving works include St Charles Borromeo Catholic Church in Ryde, St Patrick's Cathedral in Parramatta, as well as St Augustine of Hippo in Balmain and St Benedict's in Chippendale. These represent just some of the buildings Pugin designed in Australia. His works in Britain and Ireland have been excluded. He also founded an architecture firm which, following his death in 1852, was run by two of his sons, Edward and Peter. Many of the Pugin buildings were designed by these two men. Father John Terry would not live to see his little church replaced, dying on the 25th of May 1864, aged about 74. He was serving as minister of the old church of St Augustine of Hippo in Balmain at the time of his death. His beloved little St Mary's Cathedral, which overlooked Hyde Park, wouldn't outlast him by very long. On the 29th of June 1865, a Mr Grogan, who happened to be passing, spotted something which caught his eye: flames inside the cathedral. Responding quickly, Grogan wasted no time in alerting Father Garavel. The fire had broken out near the main altar, though this didn't stop Father Garavel, who removed the Blessed Sacrament at great risk to himself. Firefighters from the insurance company's brigade and the two volunteer fire companies descended on the scene, though the engines weren't much help because of low water pressure and the fact the water needed pumping from nearby Queen's Square. The flames reached the roof by 9:30 p.m, and by 10 p.m. the timbers of the roof had fallen in. Police were summoned to control the assembled crowd and protect the pieces which had been salvaged and placed in the grounds of the cathedral. Among those who gave valuable help in removing these items from the burning church was a detachment of sailors from a visiting French warship. In his quarters inside the church was Anthony Brady, a retired sacristan. Brady, who was blind and had reached the incredible age of 102, had to be guided to safety. Adding to the chaos of the night was the wind. Blowing in from the south, it swept the flames towards the nearby clergy residences, though a fire hydrant was luckily found by 11 p.m. The hydrant, located in the Bishop's Garden, was used to protect these residences. The day before, the feast of St. Peter and Paul had been held, and benediction had been given. It has been speculated that the fire lit as part of benediction hadn't been properly put out. Perhaps predictably, someone sought to claim responsibility for lighting the blaze. This fellow was named McEnroe, though inquiries revealed he had been far from the city at the time. By this time, the archdeacon of the church was a man called Father McEnroe, whose first name doesn't seem to have been recorded. Rising to meet the challenge before him, McEnroe quickly started planning and gathering funds to build the new cathedral. The role of creating actual plans for the new cathedral fell to the previously mentioned Archbishop John Bede Paulding. Paulding had been initially sent to Tasmania on his arrival in 1835, though before long he moved to Sydney. Paulding felt impressed by the work of architect William Wardell on St John's College at Sydney University. Wardell had also been the architect responsible for designing St Patrick's Cathedral in Melbourne, on which work had started in 1858. With these credits to his name, he was contracted to work on the new cathedral. Paulding sent a letter to Wardell, writing in his own words, "Any plan, any style, anything that is beautiful and grand, to the extent of our power," thus giving Wardell 100% carte blanche in his efforts. As one of Augustus Pugin's students, Wardell knew the Gothic Revival style well. Two intermediate buildings were constructed before Paulding's elegant plans could be realised. These were a school and a temporary timber church. Ironically, in the summer of 1869, the temporary wooden church suffered the same fiery demise as its predecessor. The school, which bore the name St Mary's School, was a much stronger brick building, and it continued in use as a school for many years afterwards, long after the existing cathedral had been completed. Fortunately, work on the third structure was underway by this time. Completion would take over 100 years. Anyone who has seen St Mary's is well aware of how grand, elegant and imposing the building is, as Paulding had intended. Paulding attended the foundation stones laying in 1868, though he died in 1877, before the completion of his creation. On Paulding's death, Archbishop Roger William Bede Vaughan took the reins and ministered the building's dedication mass on the 8th of September 1882. Vaughan died not long after, on August the 18th, 1883, in Britain, aged 49. The contractor engaged to build this part of the cathedral was John Young. British-born Young had started leaving his mark after moving to Sydney from Victoria in 1866, where he had struggled somewhat to gain a footing. The replacement for Archbishop Vaughan was Archbishop Patrick Moran. Moran became Archbishop at a time when much work on the cathedral remained to be done, and this continued under his successor, Archbishop Michael Kelly. The company which carried out the work under Archbishop Michael Kelly was Hennessy and Company. This firm had made an international name for itself, with works bearing the Hennessy and Company name appearing in South Africa, New Zealand, and every Australian state capital. In the decades since, St Mary's has played host to significant events. One of these involved Joseph Lyons, who served as the Prime Minister in 1939. Lyons, the sole Tasmanian to ever hold that position, died on April the 7th, 1939, having suffered a heart attack while still in office 2 days prior. His body lay in state at St Mary's over several days before internment in his birthplace of Devonport, Tasmania. On his arrival in the colony in 1820, Father John Terry said he experienced a vision of a mighty church of golden stone dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, raising its twin spires above the city of Sydney. Work on the cathedral continued until finally the spires were added in the year 2000 to celebrate the start of the new millennium with the help of a government grant. The addition of the spires completed the combined vision of William Wardell and Father Terry. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please give a thought to subscribing to the channel to access more content and to support my continued work. You can also subscribe to my Facebook page, Ben's History Videos Official. The link is on your screen.